Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and also good day. I'm Henry Wang Huiyao, CCG and host of CCG Global Dialogue Series. You are watching Forum online program advancing the 2030 agenda in uncertain times, sustainability and for the China-U.S. cooperation, featuring the Honorable Secretary Henry Paulson and also Mr. Wang Shi. Mr. Paulson served as the 74th Secretary of the Treasury under the President George W. Bush from July 2006 to January 2009. As a Treasury Secretary, Paulson led the nation's response to the financial crisis in 2008, helping to stabilize the global financial system and avoid the second Great Recession. He also designed the strategic economic dialogue to revitalize the way U.S.-China relations was conducted, achieving major breakthroughs on currency manipulations, trade flows, and environment, and global financial stability. Prior to that, Mr. Paulson had a 32 years career at Goldman Sachs, serving as a chairman and CEO beginning in 1999. As a banker, he grew the Goldman Sachs presence in China. Today, he is the chairman of Paulson Institute, which aims to foster a U.S.-China relation that maintains global order in a rapidly evolving world. In 2021, Paulson helped launch and become the executive chairman of TPG Rise Climate, the climate investing platform of global private equity firm TPG. His leadership of TPG Rise Climate reflects his belief that there is an urgent need to accelerate action against the climate change and that innovative vehicles for private sector's financing will be essential for meeting the challenges. Mr. Paulson is also co-chair of the Epson Institute Economic Strategic Group, co-chair of the advisory board of a Bloomberg New Economy Forum. He also chairs a number of leading environment NGOs, including the Nature Conservancy Board of Directors and its Asia Pacific Council. Also, Mr. Paulson is the author of two bestsellers. One is that On the Blink and Dealing with China. The other book is Dealing with China. She is also the co-author of two books with former chair of Federal Reserve Ben Bernanke and former Secretary Tim Geithner. So I would like to also introduce Mr. Wang Shi. Mr. Wang Shi is the senior vice chair of Center for China and Globalization, CCG. He's the household name in China. He founded the Vanke in 1984 during a period when China's private economy barely started to develop. Under his leadership, Vanke has grown into the world's largest residential property and developer by sales revenue, and also is the pioneer of China green home construction. A devoted environmental conservationist and practitioner of CSR, Mr. Wang Shi has also created and led many influential environmental advocacy groups and charity organizations. Chief among them is the Society of Entrepreneurs and Ecological, known as SEE. He had been involved in global climate governance since 2009, having practiced in the United Nations climate change, participated in the United Nations Climate Change Conference and other programs. In 2013, he was elected the first Chinese board of directors of World Wildlife Fund. From 2011 on, he studied the business and ethics across the cultural research at the University of the West, in the West, actually, in Harvard. I know that I was there at the same time, and become a visiting scholar also at the Cambridge and Hebrew University. Mr. Wang is widely known in China for his passion for mountain climbing. He literally set trends for scaling Mount Everest and Antarctic expedition in China. Mr. Wang is the author of 5 books. So Secretary Paulson and Mr. Wang are all dedicated conservationists, and both are leading a financial and philanthropic course to address the climate change and biodiversity loss. With less than 10 years left to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, the world needs to pick up the pace and also put great efforts in finding the better solutions. The environment agenda, which is core to the SDGs, will depend critically on the ability of the world's two largest economies, the United States and China, to find a path towards partnership on climate action and ecological conservation. In less than 60 minutes, we're going to tap into their insights on sustainability issues, climate finance, and US-China cooperation. So without further ado, let me turn to Secretary Paulson first. Mr. Paulson is joining us from Chicago on the evening of June 19th. Happy Father's Day. So probably, Hank, you can have your open statement. Welcome to Strategic Dialogue. You should have opened your microphone, Hank. You need to open your microphone.
Okay, so Dr. Wang, I want to first make sure you can hear me.
Yes.
I could hear you coming in and out sometimes more clearly than others. But if you can hear me, let me say how delighted I am to see you again and to be on a program with my good friend Wang Shi. I'm a big admirer of Wang Shi and have enjoyed working with him over many years. Now, in terms of the Paulson Institute, when I set this up in 2011, I set up an independent think and do tank with the idea of sparking innovation, creativity, economic policy changes, environmental policies changes to help promote sustainable economic growth and a cleaner environment around the world. And my focus was on US-China, because I believe then, even though the relationship wasn't as troubled as it is today, I believe then, as I believe now, that this is the most consequential relationship in the world. And here we're talking about the two biggest economies, the two biggest carbon emitters, energy users. And to me, if we're going to make progress in these areas, it's important that we find ways to work in complementary ways. And so again, the Paulson Institute was focused on pooling ideas from both countries, developing solutions that would help lead to advance economic growth and economic policy and a cleaner environment in both countries. Now, you cited the Paulson Prize, and that's one of our initiatives. And here, the Paulson Prize is designed to identify in China innovative, scalable programs that can promote the sustainable urbanization and a clean environment. And I think we've done a pretty good job of developing best-in-class programs. And here, again, the focus is on helping for China's transition to a sustainable, cleaner economy. And we focus the prize in two areas, which is green energy, green energy, and a focus on conservation stewardship, nature stewardship. And so that's a quick overview. And again, it's something that's very important to us.
Thank you, Hank. That's great. I mean, that's a great start of your introduction of the Paulson Institute. We know that actually CCG has supported the Paulson Prize for Sustainability in the past years. And I was actually at the award ceremony held at Bloomberg's New Economy forum in 2019 in Beijing, and you were there. And so CCG is very pleased to become a partner of this program last year as well. So it's great to see both of you. And I know you are the mastermind behind this prize. And of course, Mr. Wang is a member of its jury committee. So I understand that you both recently met in Chicago. So maybe I can tell us how did the synergy come about? 说这个王石，我知道你现在在这个欧洲哈，现在你最近有一个很大的。
So one, you're in Europe right now. This is a very great journey in Greek. This is 4 o'clock in the morning, your local time, and you have met with each other with Mr. Paulson. The Paulson Fund and also the relative activities for the sustainable development. You're also one member of the panel of the judges for that prize. So please share with us your synergy and also your recent activities. Can you hear me? Is it audible? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So having this chance to meet with Mr. Paulson online is very valuable. It's fair to say that in early May, I embarked on my journey in Europe. And this journey is actually a journey starting from US, from Washington, D.C. to Chicago, Boston, and all the way to New York on the vessel, actually, and I'm still on the way. And right now I'm in Athens. And yes, for Athens, yes, so this is the cradle, one of the cradles for civilizations of human beings. And right now, here I am, I'm in Greek. And this is also the place with very popular activities on canals. And it's going to last to the end of July. And this is a very important stop. US is very important stop. After Washington, D.C., there is another stop that I'm going to come by in Chicago. And there are 5 lakes. And the connection of the 5 lakes and the canals, that's going to be a very splendid journey as well. From New York, and New York is one of the biggest ports in US and also one of the biggest financial centers in the world as well. And I was attending several environmental protection and conservation activities and conferences in Boston. And one arrangement is for the speedboat racing, and also visited the homes of Henry Paulson, and also it impressed me a lot. That memory impressed me a lot. So the beginning moments of meeting with Henry Paulson is also very impressive. About 18 years ago, it was about 2004. At that time, Henry Paulson is the CEO and the chairman of Goldman Sachs, and a very influential financial leader. And I am also a leader in the delegation of a businessman of China. And SEE is the organization I set up. In terms of the environmental protection and conservation, well, both of us have great passions. But of course, we are still lack of experiences. In terms of the teamwork, we also are a very late starter. So we signed the strategic agreement with the TNC led by Henry Paulson. I still remember that was in the Great Hall of People in China. And this was actually the official first moment or first time we met with each other.
We didn't talk much. What impressed me most is that at that time, at Wall Street, investment bankers were not very focused on green technology or environmental protection or ESG. However, Mr. Paulson was very much focused on that. And that impressed me a lot because he was both a financier and an environmentalist. And over the years, we have been working together with TNC, and our group has grown from 100 business people to over 1,000. And we've learned a lot about environmental protection and ecology and NGO governance. And in China, close to 1,000 NGOs have been supported by us, and ICE has become a large environmental foundation in China. Having said that, I'd like to talk about myself. In 2002, I was mountaineering, and I went to the highest peak in Africa, and I didn't see any snow on that peak. Actually, it should be snow-capped, but I didn't see any snow. The conclusion I got was climate change and global warming. It is not just that peak. I also went to the South Pole and North Pole, not as cold as I expected. I remember that when I traveled to the South Pole, we stayed for 20 minutes without any clothes on my back. And since then, I've decided to do environmental protection. And I participated in large global NGO activities. And Mr. Paulson is always there. And we know that in the United States, there are some large NGO organizations. And Mr. Paulson is the person that can connect those large NGOs together in the United States. So you asked me how I met Mr. Paulson. He said that he set up the Paulson Institute in 2011. At that time, I was a director of WEF. And some large US NGOs went to the Paulson Institute in Chicago to coordinate their activities. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wang Shi, for your very impressive story and your meeting with Mr. Paulson, and both of you getting involved in environmental actions. It seems that that's a very good case for US and Chinese entrepreneurs getting involved in environment.
At the current rate of change, none of the 17 UN 17 SDGs objective will be.
Could I, excuse me a minute, could I ask a favor?
对不起，
Yeah.
我能问一下吗？
I hear the translator very well,
Okay.
but Dr. Wong, I don't hear him very well. So he comes in and out. So if the translator could give me Dr. Wong's English, then I'll say. Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe can you hear me now? Hank, can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't hear you now.
Oh, can you hear me? So can you hear me now?
You're very faint. So if you could actually talk to me in Chinese and have her translate, then it'll work perfectly.
Okay, could do that. Yes. 好，那我可以讲中文也没问题，你可以听见是吧？ Let me try this. Can you hear me this time?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Okay, maybe I'll use this microphone. Great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, what I'm saying actually, what I heard once just said.
Now I don't hear you.
Oh, you don't? So, did you stay in the English channel all the time? So, can you hear me, Han?
Very faintly, very faint. It's so much better translator, Dr. Wong.
Okay. So maybe I'll speak in Chinese or. So can you hear me now? Yeah.
Very faint. Let's do the translation.
Can you hear me?
I don't hear you. Can we do the speak Chinese and let me hear the translation? Will be perfect. I don't hear you. If you can hear me, ask me the question in Chinese. I'll translate. It'll be perfect.
According to the UN 2022 Asian and the Pacific Sustainable Development Goal Progress Report, at the current rate of change, none of the 17 SDG objectives will be achieved in all 5 sub-regions. So from your experience working in climate action and biodiversity, what are the possible solutions to this? Actually, I mean, you've been advocating for economically and environmentally beneficial market solutions to decarbonization. What is the role of private sector in responding to the climate change? What role should the financial institution play? Actually, you know, like I was also talking to Larry Summers. He was saying the World Bank, I mean, AIB, ADB, all the other banks could play more roles. So what do you think of the private sector financial institution roles?
Well, first of all, Dr. Wong, I heard you perfectly now. so good. And now I'm getting an which I don't like. Could someone mute their phone so I don't hear the echo when I answer? So anyway, there's a lot of discussion about the role of the private sector. To me, climate change is the major predictable crisis that our planet faces. And this can only be solved if government and the private sector work together, right? Governments can do research on climate, they can set policy, but only the private sector can implement those policies, roll them out in scale. Only the private sector. And so let's start with the private sector. It seems to me that the private sector, there's a number of things. First of all, financial institutions need to do a better job of developing climate financing techniques and models. They can do stress tests. I think financial institutions need to disclose the impact of investment, right? Positive and negative impact on climate. So that's pretty clear in terms of that. Venture capital firms can do a lot of work in terms of develop breakthrough technologies and get them ready to scale. That's pretty clear. Also private equity firms. I'm the executive chairman of a TPG private equity firm, and they can put capital behind climate solutions that are proven to accelerate the development of those. But you need to begin with the fact that private sector can't do it without the government policies. It's going to take trillions and trillions of dollars the governments don't have. That money needs to come from the private sector, correct? And it's not a sustainable model for the private sector to make loans or investments that are going to make losses. So the government needs to create the regulatory environment. I agree with Dr. Summers that one of the biggest things that needs to be done is to reform the multilateral development banks and the Bretton Woods institutions. But there, the governments need to come together and change the charter so that these institutions have the financial resources and the technical resources and the legal framework it takes to do the work that they need to do. So what I would say right now, the private sector is well ahead of governments, and that there's a lot of ambition in the private sector, but if we talk too much about private sector, it takes the focus on what needs to be done, because governments need the political will to put the policies in place that are going to let the private sector be successful.
Great, thank you, Hank. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So great. I mean, you have made a lot of great initiatives.
Now I don't hear you again.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. I mean, thank you, Hank. You made a lot of great initiatives. I think that has been very dedicated to this thing. I think that we need global business leaders and financial leaders, and as you said, government, to really all work together. NGOs combined to really achieve this sustainable development consensus and also efforts to that. Now I'd like to talk to 王石。那么我知道王石王石先生，那么你去年参加了在格拉斯哥举行的这个 COP26的会议，那么在其中你认为最大的收获是什么？比如说你对这个碳中和经济有什么看法？
For example, the low carbon economy. What is your take on the carbon neutral economy in terms of how such economy benefit both business and environment? So I couldn't hear very clearly your voice. Can you hear me now? Am I audible? Mr. Wang? Still not audible, not that clear. Please ask the question again. Oh, it's okay now. Yes, last year you went to COP26 of UNFCCC in Glasgow. What is your biggest takeaway in this conference, and what is your take on the carbon neutrality economy in terms of how such economy would benefit both business and environment? So we'd like to hear your takeaway on this issue. Yes. Am I audible? Yes. Clear and out. So it's fair to say that last year in COP26 in Glasgow, I was attending that conference, and I also for the first time organized the executives or senior executives of Chinese businesses. And from 2009 all the way to 2019, I was organizing the businessmen on behalf of China's businessmen to attend the China's conference in Glasgow, in the COP conferences, including Glasgow conference of last year. It's fair to say that it's a very great achievement and a lot of takeaways. And the number of the conferences and meetings of the COP26 regarding China is increasing year by year. So with the China senior managers, the conversation was very good, and we reached consensus among us. And the COP26 is the conference with the biggest number of the attendees, about 25,000 attendees attending the conference in Glasgow. And this is in the official meeting, and after the meeting, there's also a lot of activities surrounding the COP26. It's fair to say that every day we would see numerous meetings and conversations being held, also including China's delegations and activities, and also a lot of attention has been spared to China as well. That is my impression, and my biggest impression, or left the biggest impression to me for the 12 past years. And last year, due to the COVID, we have to get COVID test every day. And all the organizations and countries' delegations are very passionate about the conference. And on the COP26, a tropical forest protection declaration was launched. And we want to wait and see for the final achievements and how this declaration ended up. And we need to see how actions were taken instead of just lip services. And at the same time, we feel that although we know there's a lot of imperative issues in front of us, but still we have to strike the balance of the different interests and also the interests of the different stakeholders. So the agreement reached by all stakeholders is very difficult. Nobody knows what will come until the last minute. So this is really a valuable and a hard-earned declaration in the end. For example, US and China and EU, the conversations and explorations on the future solutions for cooperation is always continued. And without the participation by either one of them, there's no speak of the collaboration in the end for the climate issues and many other issues related to this. But still, I'm very positive about this outcome. China's businesses and China's businessmen or entrepreneurs of China, they also have expressed their feelings and opinions in the COP26, and they have shared the stories of the 4 decades of reform and opening of China. And in the first 2 decades, China was mainly featured by the fast development or the high growth rate of the economy. And so that has been acknowledged by the world. And in the second 2 decades, activities of low carbon development also initiated and embarked on. So the private businesses initiated the journey, and the state-owned enterprises initiated their own journey, and they combined their journeys together. and MNCs and private sectors and public sectors, they combined their efforts together. And that's why the environmental conservation and the natural conservation have achieved a lot of achievements. At the same time, the government and the private companies and public companies, they have to join hands together, just being alluded to by Mr. Henry Paulson, that the passion and also the endeavors need to be generated, and also especially from the private enterprises. So the consensus and also the declaration and achievements reached by all stakeholders and governments in UNFCCC COP conference is very important, especially on the climate summit and also in the climate related conference. China needs to demonstrate its own features and also demonstrate its own achievements as a demonstrative to other countries. And also we also need to have other countries to know our own features and traditions as a foundation for further collaboration between each other. So I think more and more we will see opportunities like this. On the other hand, China's NGO also continue becoming stronger and stronger. We have witnessed their strength on COP26 as well. In the past, the NGO's participation was not that strong, but on this COP26, so we have seen a very strong participation and endeavor made by the NGOs of China, and they become more and more influential. And the third positive takeaway is that the youngsters are the future of all kinds of endeavors. We have also seen the jointly launched the United Coalition of Universities, sort of like this, have been launched last year. And this is also very important to demonstrate the strength of the youngsters from this young graduates from the universities as well. We have also seen the organizations organized by the university students and scholars, young scholars, and they made a lot of speeches on the COP26 conferences as well. And we have had the activities both online and offline, participated by a lot of young scholars and students from universities and colleges. I think the journey ahead of us are full of bumps. And China is also have a long way to go. The 2030 carbon peaking and 2060 carbon neutrality, the dual carbon goals are in front of us, which is very arduous. And China's 2060 and other advanced countries are normally 2050, 10 years left behind. Probably we can set the deadline a little bit earlier than scheduled. But I think 2060 is the realistic deadline. Even 2060 is very arduous for us. But on the COP 26, China's delegates have made the commitments that we would try our best before 2060, carbon neutrality will be attained by China. And this is a realistic target, and we'll try our best to attain that target. So I think this is really good environment created by all delegations. And this is also very positive to push forward and promote the future initiative. And China's NGOs and China's organizations played a very big role. As for my participation, on my part, I've expressed that I, not only on behalf of my company, my group, Danco, but also I'm on behalf of the different sectors and industry of China, like real estate sector, real estate or housing sector is account for more than 10% of the carbon emissions in manufacturing. In terms of the building materials for the commercial buildings or residential buildings and the school buildings and all kinds of buildings, the carbon emission in the building materials account for even bigger, about 30 to 35% of the total urban development. Compared to advanced countries, this is a little bit bigger. So although this chunk is very big, still we are on the way to abate it. On COP26 conference, we made it very clear that we are going to make a very clear plan and also clear targets to attain before COP26 and express it on 27. And right now we are on the way of the carbon abatement in urban development, in the building of those infrastructures and the housings. So COP26 is not only the demonstration of actions, but also the commitment that we are going to prepare for COP27, and we are going to launch our plan in the near future. Thank you. Can you hear me? This is my new.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, I can see what Mr. Wang just said. The very important is to have private sector and business sector, government, to work together to achieve these sustainable environment objectives. Of course, so carbon neutral. So you, Mr. Wang, you emphasized the importance of business, government, and of course also NGO. So that's a great example. What you have experienced at the COP26. And what I think actually is very useful is that you also mentioned about business, mobilization. I mean, they have to do that. I mean, China is now the business sector, for example, the clean energy vehicle, Tesla is doing fabulous in China. Wind power, solar power, all those things that China is leading probably in the world to some extent. But also you mentioned about the real estate sector, where Wanke is a big one of the largest real estate developer in China. And actually, you mentioned about there's 30–40% that carbon emission could be done, be saved through the real estate development. So that's really great stuff that to talk about. Now I'd like to talk to Secretary Paulson now, and the biggest challenge actually for achieving 2030 agenda today lies actually fragmented.
Dr. Wang, I hear you again. You're cutting in and out.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Hank? Can you hear me now?
I can hear that, right.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to talk to you now is that the biggest challenge actually for achieving the 2030 agenda today lies in our fragmented multilateral system. It is unfortunate that the United States and China, particularly the world's two largest economies, are locked in this tense strategic competition, where it's also Secretary Blinken recently mentioned the competition as well. So Mr. President, you mentioned about economic eye curtain speech really drive the message home some time ago. So climate change is the area of U.S.-China cooperation that holds really potential. And both Secretary John Kerry and Minister Xie Zhenhua, the two climate envoy by both President Xi and President Biden, has spoke each other at Davos and COP26 and actually reached agreement. John Kerry actually even attended our meeting at the Security Conference about 2 years ago at the CCG. So what do you think? I mean, how the U.S. and China relation go forward? I mean, what are the possible paths for cooperation for the two countries amongst the competition? But then there's a climate change, there's a finance crisis, a recession, high inflation, people to people exchange, global development. So what's your overall assessment, for the Sino-U.S. cooperation, and what are the challenges we have to face?
Okay, Dr. Wang, I think I got most of that. So let me begin by saying, I think there's no doubt that our two countries are strategic competitors. And I think we're competitors across really all of the domains, technology, finance, economy, military, and ideology. But despite that, our two countries have common goals. We have some shared interests. We need to have peace, stability, world order, a stable climate, right? And so we have shared goals. And so the question is, how can we cooperate at the same time we compete? And, I think there's a number of areas that are important. Citizen exchanges are very important. I mean, the work that Wang Shi and I have done over the years, what I found, even though I have a very different culture and political system, the Chinese and American people like each other. We have a natural affinity for each other. And I think some of it has been hampered by COVID, right? I haven't been able to travel to China since 2019. Many business people that were in China have come back as a result of COVID. So I think that's important. Climate change obviously is another area, and that is an area that our two presidents have designated as an area where we should work together. We've got groups working together on methane and on other things as climate. I think this is made more difficult by the competitive relationship and what I consider to be a fraud. But as I think about the areas where we should be working together, and I think it's important to both countries that we do this and to the whole world, because we are the biggest climate emitters, right? China is by far the biggest emitter of carbon emissions, and the US has only 4% of the world's population, but 11 to 12% of carbon emissions, right? And so both countries have got a real need to work together. And so here's what I think we should be doing. First, we both should be doing more research and developing the breakthrough technologies we're going to need to avoid climate disaster, and some of the harder technologies we need to do. So that is clearly an area we should work together. I think we both should work on lifting and eliminating tariffs on environmental goods or services. It makes no sense to charge tariffs on environmental goods and services, right? Doesn't make economic sense, doesn't make ethical sense to pay more for the environmental goods and services we need. We can cooperate more. We each need to provide incentives to channel private sector money into developing and rolling out in scale the technologies that we need to reduce carbon emissions. I think we both can do more to share technologies and make sure that we deploy the key technologies in each of our countries. This may require some concession on both of our governments' part, but I think that's very important. I think so. We need to develop clean technologies, and I think we need to really work to accelerate the reduction of carbon emissions in emerging nations. Each of us can do that, right? Just looking at the brick and roads countries, they're responsible for 28% of carbon emissions today, but by 2050 it could be 60% if we don't do something. So we can work there. And lastly, I'm going to come back to the point that you mentioned that Larry Summers said, which is, when we look at carbon governance, global carbon governance, because, to me, it was inspiring, really inspiring to hear what Wang Shi was doing and everything China was doing and Wang Shi has done Glasgow. That's very, very necessary, but it's not sufficient, right? So right now, we are, even if we met the Glasgow targets, the globe would overheat, and we're not even close to being on a path to meet those targets, right? And so I think we need a different approach to climate governance. And we're not going to get anywhere unless we see the US, China, India, the other big countries doing more at the governmental level to incentivize industry. So there's a lot we can do. One area where we can work on together is, on the Belt and Road, for instance, and the Paulson Institute, my institute, is working with the Green Principles. We were the first U.S. NGO to join into that effort, work with to set green development principles for the Belt and Road. I think in working with multilateral development banks, the Paulson Institute is working with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which are doing some very interesting things there. But I think all multilateral development banks and the Bretton Woods institutions need to do more. And we're not going to do more unless the governments come together to give them the capacity and the financial support they need. And so this is an area where U.S. and China and the other major countries of the world need to cooperate and work together. So there's a lot to be done. I've got to be honest in saying there's not nearly as much being done as should be being done. And that has to do with, the strategic competition and the nature of the fraught relationship between our two countries. But I come back again to say there's nothing wrong with admitting we're strategic competitors and we're competing in all these areas. But we also need to acknowledge both countries have shared goals. We need peace. We need prosperity. We need a global order that works. And we need to save our planet, because climate change is a threat not only to economic security, but global stability and life on Earth as we know it. So I believe that we have a saying in the U.S. that necessity is the mother of invention, right? And I happen to believe that necessity is going to bring our countries together. And again, I look forward to the day when we can travel freely and I can visit China and we can have more interpersonal relations. Because the reason I set up, part of the reasons I set up the Paulson Institute is I knew there were going to be tough times between our governments, Beijing and Washington, D.C. Now, I didn't predict it was going to be as tough as it is now, but there are going to be tough times. And I think we need other linkages, people-to-people linkages, economic linkages, NGOs working together, people working together to solve. And that's why I think the work that Wang Shi did, bringing the big delegation from China to Glasgow to interact with all the other leaders around the world, is so essential. So I say thank you to Wang Shi.
Great. Thank you, Hank. You're absolutely right. I think we need the multiple linkages and exchanges and dialogues like this, and particularly face-to-face dialogue that we hope that you can come as soon as we lifted all those quarantines. And so you mentioned about this critical component of cooperation between China and U.S. I mean, you particularly, I highly support your idea. On a tariff for those environmental sustainable development products, we should really give them, lift the tariff sanctions. Particularly now we're facing such a high inflation. I mean, also the food crisis, energy crisis, Ukraine-Russian conflict. I I think now probably we're seeing the report. Probably President.
I was talking about. So that's a different issue. And I think the US government is looking at reducing those tariffs. I've said from the beginning that those tariffs don't make economic sense, not good for either country, and is a tax on US consumers and is not good for trade. But I was making a different point. I was making a point that there have been longstanding tariffs on environmental goods and services. And there, I think China needs to do more. Because when we've tried to get people together and at the WTA and do things with the WTO and elsewhere to lift environmental goods and tariffs on environmental goods and services, there China has been resistant to eliminating those tariffs. So I think there's more we can do in these areas. And I know they're politically complicated, and I know that the competition and economic competition makes it more complicated, but I think that the fight to save our planet is more important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to do both on both sides. I mean, leave tariff on, China, U.S. should do all the same. I mean, that's great. I think the statement that we made here. But also you mentioned about this green Belt and Road. I mean, that's very interesting. You have helping setting the green standard on that. And also Biden has proposed B3W, there's a BRI, there's EU global gateway. I mean, infrastructure, green infrastructure are probably the need for the future, and we should probably all work together on that.
Oh, yeah.
Find something together to work on.
That's extremely important, because the world needs hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe trillions of dollars in infrastructure. But how that, and no NGO likes to see infrastructure. You know, they've never seen a dam they like, they never see a road they like, never seen a railroad they like, never seen an oil well, but they all can be done in ways while there's less damage on the environment. And that's another area the Paulson Institute is looked to work with organizations. And I think every development bank, including the China Development Bank, the Exim Bank, all the development banks can do a better job of planning in advance, right? Rather than writing impact statements after the project has already been done to harm the environment, the plan and to figure out how to build the infrastructure so as to do as little damage as possible to the environment. And we haven't talked much about the biodiversity crisis, but I see the biodiversity crisis as being every bit as alarming as the climate crisis, because two of them go together. But the climate crisis is accelerating the destruction of biodiversity and vice versa. And we're seeing species extinction on Earth at 1,000 times the natural rate. So at this rate, 50% of all species on Earth would be extinct by 2050. And so in many ways, this is even more alarming than climate change, because with climate change, we understand the science behind it, right? And we understand what we need to know. But in terms of disrupting Mother Nature, we don't even know what we don't know. And so I think it's alarming. And so the key thing we need to do is protect the environment and not destroy it. And we can do some simple things that the financial institutions do, and in terms of our ag subsidiaries and fishing and timbering, subsidies in those areas. So there's a lot we can do. China has done a lot in China, an awful lot with a cleaner China. I think there's a potential for China to do more outside of China, looking at the biodiversity, but there's a potential for all of us to do more. And so this is, again, another area that where there's a global crisis, which I hope really brings people together. And I think COVID has led people to focus more on Mother Nature, right? And so I think that may be an incentive. But again, this is an area where Wang Shi has been a real leader. And the work that he and his foundation have done in terms of restoring mangroves, for instance, which are vital to the ecosystem, protecting coastlines and nurseries for fishes and so on. And so he also been a leader in this area in China, and we've been pleased and honored to work with him within China on biodiversity conservation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hank, for excellent remarks. Absolutely. I mean, the cooperation between China and U.S. on all those development banks, infrastructure, and biodiversity, absolutely crucial. So thank you again for that. And actually, my staff was telling me we're almost closing, but we actually had multiple channels online, almost 500,000 viewers that tuned into our dialogue. So to conclude, I would like to have both Wang Shi and Hank for your closing remarks. How can we, particularly from business community, NGO sectors, can we work together between China and the U.S. on those common challenges facing the world, and how can we the two countries be leading?
I can't hear your question. Are you saying how do we work together better?
Yeah, how can we work better? I mean, China and the U.S. in terms of those common challenges facing humankind, climate change, and the biodiversity, and of course, all those future the catastrophe. I mean, economic, recession. So perhaps Wang Shi can conclude that. And I'll have Secretary Paulson to conclude after you. Wang Shi, 你能听见吗？ 开一下你的话筒。
我这话筒开着呢，现在可以吗？
It's on mute. Thank you.
谢谢啊，刚才听的。
Thank you. Yeah, listening to the presentation made by Mr. Henry Paulson, I felt the same thing regarding how to better facilitate the cooperation and collaboration between US and China in the future for the common challenges faced by human beings. As a leader of NGO and a leader in a business community in China, I think after China joined WTO, China has been regarded as a market which was open. And at the same time, China is also a very important bridge between the different streams of the flow of the commodities and services. So as a businessman, from the business environment, it's fair to say that from the beginning of reform and opening up all the way to now, across the whole systems of the finance, the commodities development and the trade and everything, we have seen the interrelated world between you and me, between different countries and different stakeholders. Well, actually, after 50 years of journey of this visit, be it in US or Europe, the MNCs or the companies or SMEs having relations with China's enterprises, especially the SMEs, is very important because MNCs, so you don't have to talk too much about it. They have their organization operation in China already. But for SMEs of other countries, their relation with China's businesses is really valuable, especially against the background of COVID, against the background of the current challenges in the supply chain, especially. We have seen the blocking and the disruptions during these years. So it's a really hard, very hard time. And like the business of China, for them, it's very hard to get out. And for those business in other countries, very hard to them to get in China. So from the emotional perspective, or from the business perspective, it's really hard times. The connection is very important. And we have felt a lot of disruptions in the connections between each other. So the conflict does not come from the trade barriers or the tariffs or the trade conflicts, not that. It's the COVID, it's the pandemic. We have had the same expectation that after COVID is over, we can be connected and reconnected together. So everyone is actually prepared for that moment to come, couldn't wait for that moment to come. So after so many years of the connections, other countries, especially those tourist countries, that they have got used to numerous Chinese visitors and tourists coming to their territories to visit, and they earn money also in the end. And so right now, there's a lot of disruptions and a blockage of the travel, the ban in travel, which lead to the disruptions of their income in these tourist countries as well. So a lot of countries, they really in the great need of China's investment. The international investment and international assistance in some less developed countries is also very important. So we need to reopen. And in terms of, for example, the clean energies development, like the wind power development, batteries, and the energy storage, and we have felt that this country is in need of China's investment, collaboration, and China's companies to come and to reside over there, to cooperate with them. So the climate is becoming warmer. This is one issue. Cooperation is very necessary and is a must. And this must actually is beyond the need for conflicts. We have to join hands. And we have to set aside the conflicts of the interest. Like Paulson has said that the biodiversity conservation is equally important as climate change issues. I agree with them. And we have to keep humble as human beings in front of the nature, in front of the biological environment. because we are yet to know the full picture of the influence or impact of the climate change to biodiversity. And we have to wait and see, and we have to take initiative in preserve the nature in advance, no matter what happened in the end. And also we have to explore the common way to, or the common solutions to protect the biodiversity, which can benefit all of us, especially after COVID. So the biggest imperative of humanity, I feel, is the initiative taken by China, US, and EU countries for common development and common prosperity. But I think the three parties are the most important. US, China, and EU. These are the three most important force for NGOs. So cooperation is also the core issue for them, and above which we have to set aside the impact from the COVID, and we have to reconnect with each other. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned it very well. I think that's very important to have these exchanges between the business, between the people, and travel. Outbound tourists from China, all those good things that I think are really needed to really keep the bridges and flow. So Secretary Paulson, your last word, and how U.S.-China business and to government and also with other countries to work together for facing the common challenges.
Yeah, so I won't repeat a lot of the things I said earlier. I'll begin with the governments, and I really do think that I'm not saying much about governments because I think, unfortunately, our governments are communicating. It's good that they're communicating. There's communication at a senior level, but there's a lot of communication that isn't taking place. And so I think at the government level, I just recommend that they do things together that are simpler and easier to get done, so we can build on success. And those are the communication perhaps the strategic and military area to avoid conflict. Very important communication from the macroeconomic policies. Because one thing that this recent period has pointed out is this great irony. Just at the time that there's more trouble between our two countries, more competition, more fraught relationship, it's clear how interdependent we are. If there are issues in China, economic problems or COVID lockdowns, it impacts what happens in the US economy. If there's something in the US economy, it impacts China. If we have another global financial crisis, where it'll start, it will impact both countries. So we sure need communications about macroeconomic policy at a senior level. And then I think climate change, I outlined all the things that should be done. We know those things aren't going to be done right now. They're just not. So realistically, we have to do some simple things. The working group, that's been set up with John Kerry and his counterpart, working on methane or whatever the issues are. And so to get some simpler things done. And then I come back to the private sector, because I can be very negative, even if I get outside of Goldman Sachs, if I get outside of what's going on between the United States and China and all the conflict and fraught relationship. Just looking at globally, we're not doing the things we need to do to meet the climate crisis. But the good news is what you see in the private sector, because what we've seen is due to a lot of innovation there. We've seen the cost of renewables come down so they're competitive, right? So in half the world economies, if you have scalable wind or solar, it's competitive with, and in many cases better than coal or gas. And so we've seen that, number one. And that's a big positive. And then what we're seeing is financial institutions are putting pressure on companies to take action. Their investors are, and their customers are. The people are, the American people, the Chinese people around the world want to see progress. And so businesses are innovating at a faster rate than I've ever seen. And I've probably talked in the last year with the CEOs of 80 global companies from all over the world. And if I talked with those companies 2 or 3 years ago, they'd say, oh yeah, we're the best at environment and climate change. Talk to my sustainability officer. I want to talk to you about US-China relations or what's going on with the economy. Today, they're all focused on climate change. And so they're making progress. And so I think there. And so I think there will be opportunities for cross investment in this area and for companies to continue to make progress. And so that's where it is. But right now, I think that there's going to be a limit to what we can do and to make a lot of progress as long as the Russia is continuing to invade Ukraine. So I think that's going to be that's doing a lot to disrupt the global economy. But overall, there's plenty of things we can do, and it's very good and applicable that you had Wang Shi on this discussion. I think a lot of what is going to be done by the private sector. So thank you for this opportunity. And it's always good, we can see some of the problems we've had even with technology today. But I look forward to the day when I can travel to China and see all my friends again and have face-to-face communications. And with my colleagues at the Paulson Institute, I had a Zoom call with them again this Monday and thank them for all the work our Chinese colleagues are doing in China, in Beijing and Shanghai. But I haven't seen them in person now in a couple of years.
Okay, great. Thank you. Secretary Paulson. Excellently, you said at your closing remark. I think absolutely the government is important. They should increase the level of communication and dialogue. Absolutely, so crucial. And you emphasize the business. I mean, business is crucial. I mean, absolutely important with all the multinationals, private sectors, SME, and all the NGOs. So that's great message both of you have outlined today. I really appreciate all the great contribution you made. So that's all the time we have. We're going to conclude our special dialogue series at 8th the China Globalization Forum. We're having another 20 ambassadors roundtable next. So we have to stop here. I appreciate all your contributions. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.